When Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned to Iran in 1979, many people believed the revolution would bring justice and freedom. Instead, the years that followed became one of the most intense periods of executions in modern Iranian history. Within days of the revolution's victory, firing squads began operating. Soon public hangings appeared in city squares. Later, secret mass executions would take place inside prison walls. Throughout the 1980s, capital punishment became one of the most powerful tools of the new Islamic Republic. The fall of the Shah. On February 1st, 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini landed in Tehran after nearly 15 years in exile. Iran was already in chaos. Just weeks earlier, on January 16th, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi had left the country. His government was collapsing. Ministers resigned, military units were divided, millions of protesters filled the streets. Within 10 days of Khomeini's return, the monarchy was finished. On February 11th, revolutionary groups seized military bases, radio stations, and government buildings in Tehran. The Shah's system had fallen. The Islamic Republic had not yet been officially declared, but real power was already shifting into the hands of clerics loyal to Khomeini. Almost immediately, a new judicial structure appeared. Revolutionary courts were created to punish people linked to the old regime. Their goal was simple: swift justice. Executions began within days. The first executions. On the night of February 15th, 1979, 4 high-ranking officials from the Shah's government were brought to the roof of the Refa school in Tehran. The building had become a temporary headquarters for the revolution. The prisoners were General Mehdi Rahimi, Tehran's military governor General Reza Naji, military governor of Isfahan General Manouchehr Khosrodad, commander of the Air Force General Nematollah Nasiri, former head of SAVAK, the Shah's intelligence service. Their trials had taken place earlier that same day. The proceedings lasted only a few hours. There were no defense lawyers, no jury, no appeals. The verdicts were announced quickly: execution. That same night, the men were taken to the rooftop and lined up against a wall. Armed guards stood only a short distance away. When the order was given, the firing squad opened fire. Within minutes, it was over. Photographs and video footage were released almost immediately. The new leadership did not hide what had happened. They wanted the country to see it. The message was clear. The revolution was permanent. The rise of revolutionary courts. In the weeks that followed, executions expanded beyond military leaders. Former ministers, intelligence officials, police commanders, and people accused of supporting the Shah's regime were arrested. Many of these trials were overseen by a cleric named Sadegh Khalkhali. Khomeini had appointed him as a Sharia judge. Khalkhali quickly became one of the most powerful figures in the new judicial system. His trials were extremely short. Some lasted less than 30 minutes. The accused were brought before the judge. The charges were read. A few questions were asked. Then the sentence was announced: execution. The charges were often broad. One common accusation was corruption on earth. Another was waging war against God. Under the new system, these accusations often led directly to the death penalty. By April 1979, more than 100 officials connected to the Shah's government had been executed. At first, most were shot by firing squad, but another method soon became more common: hanging. Public hangings. By the summer of 1979, public hangings had become a familiar sight in several Iranian cities. These executions were meant to be seen. Crowds gathered in city squares. Families stood among strangers. The condemned person was brought forward with their hands tied behind their back. Instead of traditional gallows, construction cranes were often used. A rope was placed around the prisoner's neck and attached to the crane hook. Then the crane slowly lifted. Unlike a traditional hanging designed to break the neck instantly, this method caused death by strangulation. It could take several minutes. Sometimes the body remained suspended for hours. These executions were no longer just punishments. They were demonstrations of power. The state was showing that it controlled life and death, war and internal opposition. By 1980, the Islamic Republic had consolidated power. A new constitution had been approved. Khomeini became Iran's supreme leader. Revolutionary courts were now permanent institutions operating across the country. At the same time, Iran entered another crisis. In September 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. The Iran-Iraq War had begun. With the country under military pressure, the leadership became even less tolerant of opposition. executions continued. Hanging became the main method because it could be carried out quickly and repeatedly. But the most dramatic wave of executions began in 1981, the crackdown of 1981. In June 1981, massive protests broke out in Tehran after President Abolhassan Banisadr was removed from office. The protests were largely organised by the opposition group Mujahideen-e-Khalq, often called the MEK. Soon afterward, bomb attacks struck Tehran. On June 28th, a huge explosion destroyed the headquarters of the Islamic Republican Party and killed more than 70 officials. The government responded with a nationwide crackdown. Thousands of suspected opposition members were arrested. Many were young, some were university students, others were writers, activists, or people accused of distributing pamphlets. Trials followed quickly. Often they lasted only minutes. Many prisoners were taken directly from interrogation rooms to execution areas. Inside Tehran's Evin prison, mass hangings became common. Prisoners were brought down corridors in groups. Their hands were tied behind their backs. Some were blindfolded. They were hanged in clusters to speed up the process. Human rights organizations later estimated that more than 2,000 people were executed in 1981 alone. By the end of that year, the system had become routine. Arrest, short interrogation, brief trial, execution. Sometimes the entire process lasted only days, the secret mass executions of 1988. Despite the large number of executions during the early 1980s, the most shocking events were still to come. By 1988, the Iran-Iraq War had lasted nearly 8 years. The country was exhausted. In July 1988, Iran finally agreed to a ceasefire with Iraq. But shortly afterward, a secret directive was issued under Khomeini's authority. The order targeted political prisoners who were already serving sentences. Many had been arrested years earlier. Some had even finished their sentences but were still being held. Inside prisons such as Evin and Gohardasht, special panels were formed. Survivors later called them death commissions. Prisoners were brought before them one by one. The questioning was brief. Sometimes it lasted only a few minutes. If a prisoner refused to renounce their political beliefs, the decision was immediate: execution. Most were hanged. The executions were carried out secretly inside prison buildings. Groups of prisoners were brought in batches, ropes were prepared in advance. The process moved quickly. There were no public announcements, no media coverage. Families were not warned beforehand. Many only learned weeks later that their relatives had been executed. Human rights organizations estimate that between 4,000 and 5,000 prisoners were killed in just a few months during the summer of 1988. Many were buried in mass graves. One known burial site is Kavaran Cemetery, outside Tehran. Families were rarely told where their relatives were buried. Executions for drug crimes. At the same time, another wave of executions was taking place under different charges. During the 1980s, Iran faced a growing narcotics problem. After the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, drug production increased sharply. Iran lies on a major trafficking route between Afghanistan and Europe. The government introduced strict anti-drug laws. Under these laws, possession or trafficking of certain amounts of heroin, morphine or opium could lead to the death penalty. These cases were handled by revolutionary courts. Trials were usually brief. Most sentences were carried out by hanging. Some took place inside prisons, others were public executions, using cranes. By the mid-1980s, hundreds of people were being executed each year for drug offences, the end of Khomeini's era. On June 3, 1989, Ayatollah Khomeini died at the age of 86. Millions attended his funeral in Tehran. For his supporters, he was the leader who overthrew a monarchy and reshaped Iran. For others, his decade in power was marked by repression and thousands of executions. The executions stretched across the entire decade. By the time Khomeini died, the Islamic Republic had built a justice system where capital punishment was a central feature. It had been used against former regime officials, political opponents, alleged spies, drug offenders. Sometimes executions were public, sometimes they were hidden, but the impact of that decade did not disappear with his death. Thousands of families were left without answers. Many never learned where their relatives were buried. From the first firing squads of 1979 to the secret prison hangings of 1988, the system had one clear purpose: to remove perceived threats quickly and decisively. The horror was not only in the executions themselves, it was in the speed, the certainty, and the fact that many never had a real chance to defend themselves before the rope tightened or the shots were fired.